Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Prodigy from Kilo 23. Today we're going to start upgrading the Rifle Dynamics AK700 by Echo One. This is going to be the first of two videos. The first video I'm going to focus on more of the compression and the air seal and such. And the second video I'll focus on more of the mechanics and the electrical system. So this first video will be covering all the piston head, cylinder head, all that stuff we're going to throw in there. Our piston was pretty standard, so we're going to swap that out for the Modify Ultra piston. This has 7 metal teeth and it's going to last a lot longer than your stock piston. Now as far as our cylinder and cylinder head, we've got modified parts for those as well. This is a Modify Type 0 aluminum cylinder, so we'll be installing that today. And the Modify aluminum cylinder head. This has 2 O-rings and will get a much better air seal as well. Now behind me in my parts table I've actually got a Modify polycarb piston head. We're going to be installing that today as well. Now in addition to all these parts, I'll be installing a sorbothane pad as well. I actually cut my own out of a sheet I picked up a while ago, so I'll show you how I do that as well. First things first, we'll take our Modify piston head, which is this guy right here, and we'll put a drop of Loctite on the threading there. After that I have my screwdriver and I've fed my bearing assembly and the screw up through the piston. And we'll go ahead and start to thread our piston head onto the piston. Now you might get some Loctite on places aside from the threading, but that's okay. Make sure your piston and piston head are nice and tight, and the Loctite will do the rest. Now our cylinder head is going to take a little bit of force to get into the cylinder, just because the air seal is really good and they're pretty tight with each other. And you want to make sure it all lines up and is flush right here with the cylinder, and that way it'll fit properly into the gearbox. Now of course make sure when the cylinder head is installed, the cylinder fits properly into the window here. If it's a little too far back or forward, it won't quite fit, and you close your gearbox and bad things happen. Now the Modify O-ring on the piston head wasn't getting the greatest air seal, it just went straight through. But with the original Echo One O-ring in there, the air seal is quite a bit better, and with some grease in there it'll be even better. Now one thing you always want to do when you're installing a new piston is check the angle of engagement. If your last tooth is not at a good alignment with the first tooth that's engaging on the gear, it can die prematurely. And especially on high rates of fire or high FPS builds, that's much more dominant. So you want to check this, and I'll of course be removing the second to last tooth there. Probably a little bit of the third to last, and I'll show you how to cut a sorbothane pad, and that'll help me correct the AOE as well. Now for cutting out a sorbothane pad, I have a sheet of 50D 1/8 inch sorbothane. And this has worked pretty well for me for a while, but you can use softer or heavier sorbothane if you want. And I'm going to cut it here using an L96 cylinder. Now I'm just going to apply a lot of pressure and I move it around like this until it cuts all the edges. Now we have our little sorbothane pad cut out, and to cut the middle out there, or wherever you need to for your cylinder head cut, thankfully the version 3 and 2 gearboxes use it right in the center. I just use an AEG barrel. I usually use one with a really nice crowning on it, so it's got good clean edges to cut it with. Just move it around. And voila, nice and clean cut. Now I have my sorbo pad installed in there. It's not glued in yet, so I can check my angle of engagement. And I have the second tooth and a little bit of the third tooth shaved down. And the angle of engagement looks pretty good to me, so I'm going to go ahead and glue the sorbothane pad in there. I went ahead and scored the cylinder head and the sorbo pad with an X-Acto knife to make sure the super glue gets in there pretty well. And I went ahead and washed the sorbo pad with hot soap and water to make sure I get all the grease and whatever else off. There was a bit of a sticky pad on the back of it, and I went ahead and got all the sticky residue off of that so it doesn't affect the super glue. And with the sorbo pad installed and super glued, wait for it to dry for a few seconds, and go ahead and pop it back in your cylinder and check your AOE one more time just to make sure. Now finally, when installing your cylinder head for the last time here, there's a notch cut out in the Modify cylinder here. Now it's just in the cylinder, and that'll line up with the window here for the tappet plate. So just in case you have to push your cylinder head a little bit farther into your cylinder, it gives you a little bit of room to compensate there so you don't have issues with your tappet plate and feeding. Alright, that wraps it up for part 1 of the upgrade build for the Echo One AK700. On the next part, we'll be focusing on all the electrical and mechanical parts. So we'll go over all the parts we're using in the next video. Again, big thanks to Brian from Echo One and Jag Precision for letting me check out the gun and upgrade it like crazy with all these parts. It's always a ton of fun. Thanks guys, and take it easy.